So for today's episode, I have a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Navid Khazra, and he is actually the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Nakisa. And Nakisa is essentially a cloud solution for lease accounting organizational design. That's a lot of, big words. So we're going to be discovering today what actually, is all behind that and how companies can actually benefiting from the solution. So we're going to be diving into, Navid's perspective on marketing, but also learn about Nakisa and how it's serving its customers. So Navid, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Maybe so give us a breakdown. Nakisa, what is it all about in your own words?
I honestly sometimes have a hard time explaining this because what we do is sometimes seen as so very different. So uh, at, at the end of the day, Nakisa is a cloud-based business operations platform. Now, what does that mean? So it translates into a few very concrete things. One of which is organizational design, which is a very broad word, but what we're talking about is essentially supporting large organizations, enterprise. Those are our kind of our target market with the day-to-day transformations that they go through. This includes mergers and acquisitions, reorganizations, reduction in force, essentially giving them the tools they need to plan these massive transformations and see the impact of those changes. So that's part of the business. There's also more of an accounting focused part, which is lease accounting, real estate management. But at the end of the day, this is something we've thought about a lot. Is the really the simplest way to explain it is B2B business operations. That's what we do.
Yeah, makes a whole lot of sense. I would be curious, what would be the types of companies? You alluded already to enterprise a little bit there, but is there, obviously those use cases of acquisitions as an example? What's a typical client that would be leveraging Nakisa looking like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we're talking about the client base, like at the end of the day, we're talking about the biggest companies. So the example I always talk about is Walmart. Walmart Global uses both our main solutions, our Hanley organizational design solution and our lease administration solution. And so we're talking about these kind of companies that go through massive changes, but it's all over the board. I mean, it's every major industry you could think of. One interesting example, there was a company called Coty, pretty well known in, I think in Europe, they do beauty products. And they went through an acquisition a couple years ago where they went from 20,000 to I think 30 or 40,000 employees overnight. And so you're essentially taking this giant organizational structure and trying to merge it with another equally huge structure. How do you bring those people and structures together in a way that works? So that's kind of our quick snapshot of the type of customers that use our products.
Makes a lot of sense. And that brings me to the next question. Who would be the champion within? Because it seems to be very complex processes that are being touched. A lot of stakeholders being involved. Like, who is the one raising the flag that says, we need Nakisa?
So that's a really good question, and it's so hard to answer. We've thought about this a lot. Now, broadly speaking, there's always kind of the IT side, which at large companies is always involved. So whether it's HRIS or financial systems, there is the core business, which for us would be finance, accounting, and HR. But the real initiator can be such a broad range. Like as we're getting more and more into kind of this world where HR is really taking a much stronger role. It can be different departments within the organization. There's special divisions for organizational design. There's diversity inclusion departments that have become more and more commonplace. So it's really all over the place. And so that's one of the challenges for us, has been really trying to nail down the exact personas that we want to target, because it can be so many different people within a broad organization. Like HR for a company like, let's say, I don't know, Costco, which is not a customer yet, fingers crossed. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of people. So it's a good question, but it can be a bit of a challenge to define it very clearly.
Makes sense. Obviously, then I'm curious, because that obviously gives a big challenge to marketing, right? We're talking a lot about marketing here and growth marketing in the Platform podcast. What does that mean for the marketing team? Because in terms of the journey that somebody would be going through in order to get started with Nakisa? Like, how would that be looking like? What channels can you leverage if the group is relatively diverse that you could be touching?
Yeah, so it has represented quite a bit of a challenge because there are so many different personas that we need to identify. It's not just one persona for every use case that the solution touches on. Our finance solution is primarily finance and accounting, but it also has real estate capabilities, lessor capabilities, and each one of these can potentially have a different impact. So what we've ended up doing is trying to focus more on the keywords and the intent. What we do know is if someone is interested, we do know what they're interested in. We do know the topics and the keywords and the kind of things they're looking for. We have an idea of the organizations and types of events, whether it's a digital event or 2 years ago an actual physical event. We know what those are. So we don't always have a crystal clear idea of all of the personas, although I feel like we have a good enough grasp of the key ones. We do know where they go. We do know how they find us, which has been obviously how we are where we are today. You can't not know one of those.
Gotcha. So do I take it right from there, and correct me if I'm wrong, that like inbound is actually relatively important for you guys versus outbound? Like,
Oh yeah, inbound is huge. This is partially, I mean, honestly, that I think that's less related to the complexity of the buying cycle and the buying center, and more about how large enterprises are buying software these days. Like everyone wants Walmart as a customer. So it doesn't matter who we're talking about. If it, like, let's say we're talking mid-level manager or up, chances are that person is getting tons and tons and tons of emails and messages to buy hundreds of different products. So that question alone has probably been the biggest focus for us in the last, I'd say, year or two, is trying to figure out what's the best path and how do we do it. And for the most part, the answer has been inbound, to really just focus and double down on inbound.
And what role do you attribute then to the website? We obviously talk a lot about websites in the Pathfind Presents podcast. Like, how do you think about the website? What job does it take?
I mean, that's a great question. There isn't, again, I don't think there's a simple answer. I'd say it takes almost every job. It has the job of attracting potential buyers. It has the job of educating people. It has the job of getting our existing customers to have one central place to go to if they want to download product documentation. So customer retention, it plays a role there. The whole customer journey, it has a job in the entire journey.
Makes sense. As a marketer, you obviously probably, at least I would say 90% of the folks that are on the show, they're super critical with their own website, and it's an ever evolving ecosystem, that always has a new project within. So I'm curious, what would you consider the current strength of the website, in terms of maybe the ability to convert or the quality of leads or the experience that you provide? Like, where do you see the strength of the website at the moment?
It's funny because you started off saying that. I am also, I can be pretty harsh when I look at myself and when I look at the work that I do. And so I'm always looking for things to improve and things that we can do better. That's one area where it can be hard to compliment myself. One thing I'll say is that we've definitely put a lot of effort into trying to give as much information as we can with the resources that we have. So I am pretty happy about the information that we provide. If someone wants to come and learn about the basics of what we do, there's a good amount of content and videos and tools that are available for someone to just come and learn themselves. So if there was one thing, I would say that. But even there, as I'm talking, I'm like, but I'd want to improve this, and we want to change this, we want to make this better. So you can take that as you will.
Okay, yeah, maybe I will put it back to you right now. The question: where do you see the biggest room for improvement, or where do you want this site to, develop towards to?
Okay, so this so we've talked about the customer journey a few times, and this is something that we are obsessed with. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to tangent for a second. We had
Sure.
I had a new employee start about a month ago in product marketing. She's in product marketing strategy. First thing she did is she started to analyze the customer journey, and she started to ask really good questions. hey, we have a phone number on a document that's 2 years old. The phone number is disconnected. She literally went to every nook and cranny of the website and tried to figure out where would our customers end up and what does that experience look like for them. And that summarizes for me my main point of improvement for the website is to make it as easy and frictionless as possible. I just want it to be clean. Like someone just arrives and they just have this beautiful path that's crafted out where they can access the site, they see what we do, they see what's relevant to them, clear call to actions, just a journey that takes them all the way through. And I would apply that to our existing customers as well, where if they need something, whether it's support or product documentation, there's no question in their mind. I can just go here, it's super easy, super clear, that's what I need.
Cool. Yeah, you did that cleanup, or your team member was working on that cleanup. Like, what else did you try to create the journeys? Because I mean, we talk tons about this in the podcast. I'm so curious. Like, what would be one or two steps that you've been doing in order to, create those journeys?
So, without going into too much history, the way that we've, at least in marketing, operated for quite a while, we're not a huge organization. We're around 250 people. Smaller than most, bigger than some. So the way that we did it in the past is it was always just trying to iterate quickly. So we would try something, see if it worked. Basically, the philosophy of failing upward, right? Where we didn't have a whole lot of sort of concrete strategy behind it. There's just so much to do. So we have an idea, we try it. 2 weeks later, if we see it's not working, we try something else. So that's the way that we were working. Now we're really trying to scale up, and so it's a lot more strategic. Now we're really bringing in the research that we need to think about it from a longer term perspective. How do we make a change based on research, based on customer interviews? Now we're really starting to look at our actual customers and understand from them what is it that they need and what is it that they would want to see, what terminologies resonate with them. So it's a bit of a different approach where we're going from more of an execution mode of just trying to iterate quickly and move forward to thinking more strategically and longer term about how we can do something that will really, really work. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, 100%. Super interesting. It just shows how your approach has shifted with maturity. Super interesting. I want to ask you a couple of questions just about your perspective on marketing in general, right? What would you consider the biggest challenge in growth marketing or product marketing when I ask you on bringing in innovation? Like, where do you see the challenge?
Okay, so innovation is probably is the number one sort of common thread throughout everything we've done at Nakisa. We released our first piece of software in 2001. It was the first org chart released on the market, the first software org chart. I'm sure everyone knows what an org chart is. You have the boxes with the people. And so that was our first software, and it's been a constant thing with us in everything we do, from R&D, development, to sales, to marketing. And from a marketing perspective, the biggest challenge, at least for me, when I think about it, is trying to get outside of what we know, which I feel like is such a dangerous thing, especially in the last year or two, where anyone that started in marketing at the beginning of the pandemic, operating with the model of this is what we know, I'm worried for them. Like things are moving so quickly that we have to test, we have to play around with different things. And so for me, a lot of times the right choice is the one that no one else thought of, is the one that I don't see other people doing. And I feel like sometimes that's a trap people can fall into, where we say, oh, we want to implement a program, and then someone says, oh, great, why don't we just go look at what someone else is doing and we'll just copy that and we have the program. Again, I don't know if that answers your question. I have a tendency of kind of just rambling on topics. So I don't know.
No, it's great. I mean, this is exactly what the podcast is for, to see like what is, actually on the mind of the leaders in marketing at the moment. So there you go.
Yeah, so I'll give you a very quick example of this. Maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I don't remember exactly, my memory can be a bit shady. We had someone join us. She's still with us today, fantastic person. And we were thinking about demand generation, and this was very, very early on. And she kept bringing up software review sites like G2 Crowd, Capterra, those kind of sites. And this was before they really started to take off. And she kept saying, we need to invest here. We need to invest here. And, I looked at it at the time, I didn't really believe it. But I said, you know what, it's cheap, let's try it. And in the first year that we played around with Capterra, it turned out to be the highest performing channel for us, the cheapest channel for us. And I actually we looked at the data at the end of the year, the cost per click to essentially promote our product increased by, and I'm not exaggerating, probably 15 to 20 fold over the course of 1 year. And I think what happened is we just hit the right point in time, right before the market became aware. And every time we have a good idea, it's something like that, where we're anticipating what's happening a year from now, as opposed to just, oh yeah, everyone's doing webinars, so let's do webinars.
Yeah. Super interesting. It's just difficult to find those. Huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the trick.
Very good. Cool. I would be curious also to ask you, where do you see the biggest challenge for marketing when it comes to, the idea of return on investment?
So, depending on what we're talking about, it can be easier or harder. There's a few areas that it has definitely been challenging for us. One is in branding and PR activities, which I think is a universal challenge for everyone. I used to meet with our CEO and he would ask, we're spending this money on PR, on a news article, on whatever, and what does that get us? And that's a nut that I have not been able to figure out in a way that I'm happy with. It's always very loose attribution. And so, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you there. But when it comes to everything else, it's usually a lot more clear where what we're doing, for example, when we spend money on a campaign or on some kind of advertising initiative, being able to track that to the dollars that we spend is critical. And I think the most important thing when it comes to communicating with any leadership organization within a business is being able to attribute what we're doing to a dollar that comes in. So when we spend this, you get this. And earlier on in our days when we were less mature with this, with reporting on this, it was incredibly difficult to get approval for additional budget, because they would always ask, I gave you this money, I don't know what it got me. But the second we started to very clearly communicate the value of the activities that you were doing in dollars and cents, the conversation entirely changed. So for any kind of younger organization, newer organization, the first thing I would say is to make sure that you have your ROI reporting as good as you can get it, because it's the first question that will come up.
Cool. And maybe one last question in regards to sort of, your perspective on marketing. I would be curious what comes to mind when I say, when I ask you for the challenge in regards to website conversion rate optimization.
Yeah, so that's so for us in particular, it's almost like there's two competing ideas that we've been sort of thinking about and struggling with. So one is, we want more leads, more everything. We want more to come in the top of the funnel. Now, at the same time, our product is really very, very focused on large enterprise. And when I say that, I mean, I can go into details, but there are so many pieces of what we do that is really from the ground up designed to cater to the needs of large organizations, whether we're talking about scalability, performance, features and functions, coverage of use cases, whatever. And so we have this dichotomy where on one hand, I, as a marketer, want as much as possible coming in, but at the same time, what we want as a business is these large organizations that have a clear and present need, and there's so many of them out there. And so for me, the biggest challenge is a question of scalability, where we're talking about having scalable processes that allow us to deal with more volume and scale up over time, versus the customer journey that I want these organizations to experience. When someone submits a form, I want them to feel like we rolled out the red carpet for them, right? That it's not just like fill out a form, get an automated email, someone asks you a qualifying question, and then you get sent to a person who does a demo. Like, I want it to feel like this process was made for them. And that has been the biggest challenge, is the difference between those two things. How do we have automated processes that allow us to scale and not lose this sort of personalization, this red carpet feeling, for lack of a better word.
Nice. We also have a little bit of a question that makes it a little bit hard to choose. I'm curious what you're going to be saying to the following one. So Essentially, if you could only focus on one thing, right, to improve marketing for Nakisa at the moment, what would you do with the following? Would you focus on the roadmap? Would you focus on growth initiatives? Would you focus on improving the messaging, or deep dive into the reporting? Where would you turn first?
What was the second option again?
Roadmap and new growth initiatives, marketing, messaging, and reporting.
So for me, it would be growth initiatives or messaging. The roadmap, I think we, without speaking too highly of my bosses, we have a really strong leadership team, and I believe in the roadmap. Like I'm fully bought in. We're going in the right direction. The numbers show it. I'm not worried. When I look at growth, however, I think that's one area where I think we, especially where we are now as a business, it needs to be a much larger focus. I'm not worried about messaging, but I think we definitely need to make some improvements there. As I mentioned in the beginning, when it comes to the personas that we have, there's quite a bit of diversity. So the better we can get with our messaging, I think the better off we'll be. But right now, my main thing is growth.
Very cool. I'll slowly sort of, as we slowly coming to an end of the interview, I just want to, briefly ask you a little bit about your content consumption habits, because there's so much, marketing material out there. Where do you turn in order to, learn and educate yourself?
Yeah, so for me, it's almost exclusively podcasts and YouTube. I do read books, but not in marketing. Books are more of a kind of personal learning. But when it comes to marketing knowledge, industry, and trends, I have a whole stack of podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis. And it's honestly the best thing to do, because you're cooking, you're walking the dog. It allows you to learn while you do something else. So for me, that's podcasts are number one, with YouTube videos coming in a close second.
Cool. I want to wrap it up with our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
Of course.
I mean, you mentioned you're more into podcasts and YouTube. I'm still going to ask you, what's the last book that you read?
Last book. Okay, so there's the Power of Habit. Was a really good book for me personally. It allowed me to make a lot of very positive changes in my life. I myself am a very not habit forming. I have a tendency to really lock into certain habits, and figuring out how I can leverage that to my strength was a big revelation for me.
What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Customer journey, 100%. Optimizing it, streamlining it, making it as good as we can.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for the company today?
Ooh. Okay. I'm going to give you an answer I don't think you want. If there were no boundaries to technology, I want a time machine so I can go 5 years in the future and see how we did.
Good. And the very last question would be, if today would be your first day joining Nakisa, so I'm aware of the fact that you've been, around the block for a while with Nakisa. So if today would be your very first day, what's the one advice you would give yourself?
All right, so for those that may not know, I've been with the company for about 10, 11 years, and I've had many different hats. What I would tell myself is don't stay in your lane. Don't limit yourself to your job description. Do as much as you possibly can and learn as much as you possibly can. I've worn different hats, and everything I've learned in the different roles that I've had has contributed to making me who I am today, giving me the knowledge and the tools that I need to be successful. So don't stay in your lane.
Navid, I really want to thank you for being part of the show with PathMonk today. Maybe the very last word, I want to give it to you. If somebody forgets everything we talked about Nakisa today, what's the one thing that they should remember?
We are a passionate group of people that are intensely interested in market disruption. So what I mean by that is changing the way that businesses do normal things, normal business things. So that's our thing. We want to change things up.
Thanks a lot for being part of PathMonk Presents today.
Thank you so much, Lucas.